Hello, and welcome to an introduction to inclusion of children with diverse needs in early childhood education. My name is Elena Miranda, and I'll be your instructor for the semester. I thought we would start with a little song to introduce the concept of inclusion. So I'll ask you all to get up out of your seats and ready to move. If you know the words, you can follow along. If not, they will be up on the screen and you can sing along with them.
The more we get together.
It's always fun to be with friends. Let's get together more often. The more we get together, the more we get together, the happier we'll be. 'Cause your friends are my friends and my friends are your friends. The more we get together, the happier we'll be. The more we get together.
So the reason why I played that song for you is because I thought it would be a nice introduction to what we're talking about, which is inclusion. And I'm not going to get too much into what inclusion is because we're going to define it together as a class. But basically it's about belonging and children being a part of education in the classroom regardless of their physical, intellectual, and cognitive needs. So we have 3 objectives that are our goal for this class. The first one is to be able to define inclusion. The second is to demonstrate the value of inclusive education. And the third is to describe the barriers of providing inclusive education. And I'm going to keep them up on the board. That way, as we go along, I'll check them off and we can see how and where we've met these objectives. So first things first, I'd like to start off with a little independent exercise. I'll ask you to take out a piece of paper and a pen. You won't be asked to submit this, so don't worry about spelling and grammar and neatness of your writing, but I will ask you to share your responses at the end of the exercise. So I'll ask you, without talking, to answer the following questions on your piece of paper. When in your life have you felt connected or included in a group context? And how did that make you feel? I please ask you not to use family as an example. Also, when in your life have you felt disconnected or excluded in a group context? And how did that make you feel? So again, I'll give you 2 minutes to get that down, and then I'll ask you to share. Okay, so as I said, I would ask you to share. So what I'd first like to ask you is to finish the sentence. When I'm included, I feel, yeah, okay, I heard happy. Anybody else? Good. Special. Anybody else? Excited. Good. Good about yourself? Yes. And one more. Good. Accepted. Okay, so when I'm excluded, I feel, who wants to share? I heard sad. What else? Heartbroken. Good. Anybody else? Disappointed and angry. Yes. So the reason why I asked you to do this is because one of the most important things I need you to know about inclusion is that it's all dependent on you as a teacher. You have the power, believe it or not, as a teacher, to leave long-lasting impressions on the children. So as you can see, experiences have the power to leave either a positive input on you or a negative. And you, are the teacher who the children spend most of their time with, have the power to leave positive or negative impressions on them, and we hope that it's positive. So I want you to take away from this that you are the most important piece to inclusion. So I want to define inclusion and tell you a little bit about that, what that means. And in a broader sense, it means that people, children, families, individuals, regardless of this list here, feel acknowledged, respected, valued, represented, regardless of their race, culture, ethnicity, ability, sexuality, gender, and family composition, and the list goes on and on and on. And you will be working as a teacher with multiple families and multiple children of diverse needs, diverse lifestyles, family compositions, health, abilities, cognitive, physically. So it's really important to know that inclusion is about representing all those children and families, involving them in your program, regardless of this list, okay? Let me know if I'm going too fast, if you need me to slow down, or if at any point you have any questions. So, inclusion of children with diverse needs. In the field of diverse needs, inclusion typically refers to practices that support children with exceptionalities and their families. And here is a quote from your textbook. Inclusion means that children with special needs attend preschool, childcare, educational and recreational programs with their peers. Inclusion is about belonging, being valued, and having choices. Inclusion is about accepting and valuing human diversity and providing the necessary support so that all children and their families can successfully participate in the programs of their choice. So right now, I would like you to check off defining inclusion. We have defined inclusion in a broader sense, and we have defined inclusion in terms of education. And this is just the surface. We're going to get much more deeper now. So I would like to ask you to define inclusion. It's important for you to know that here in Canada, we don't have a definition for inclusion in terms of education. So every school board, every child care center, every school has their own definition of inclusion that they have developed and that they follow by. So it's important for us to start to think about what does inclusion include, because we might be working out in the field and have to develop a definition. So I would like you, one at a time, you'll notice that before class I put a marker beside you on the desk. I would like you one at a time to come up and write one word that defines inclusion for you. Okay, so you've come up with a pretty good list here. I'll give you a chance to look up at the boards. So you came up with terms such as belonging and diversity and acceptance, adaptations and modifications, so changing curriculum, changing the structure of the classroom, changing your teaching style to meet the needs of the child. But something I really want to point out to you are these two words here. You wrote down equality and equity. The difference between equality and equity is extreme. So a lot of us think equality and equity mean the same thing, and that is treating others equally, but it's not. Equality is if I give this person 10 pieces of paper and I give this person 10 pieces of paper, that is equality. Equity is giving a child something that they need to be successful. So maybe this child needs just one piece of paper because 10 pieces of paper would be too overwhelming because she has autism. I would give her one piece of paper, and the other student I would give 10 to complete the assignment. That's equity. So it's providing children with materials and opportunities to help them to be successful. So we've now demonstrated the value of inclusive education, and will continue to do so. And now I want to talk about barriers. So inclusion sounds easy. Of course, we want children in the world and in our classrooms to feel accepted and welcomed and represented in our classroom, but that doesn't always happen. There are barriers. There are both visible and invisible barriers. So an example of a visible barrier would be the classroom. So you have a child with a wheelchair, but your classroom is very cluttered, and it's very difficult for that child to get around the class. You can see that as a barrier. An invisible barrier, on the other hand, is something that you can't see. And an example of that would be our attitude. So our attitude comes from things such as our family, our background, religion, and all of these things lead to biases. And those biases can get in the way of inclusion and how we offer inclusion to children. So what I would like you to do is to get into groups of 4. You can work with the people sitting beside you. And I want you to write down on a piece of paper, what is a bias? What are 3 sources of bias? And what are 3 areas of bias? And I'll give you 2 minutes to do that, and then we'll take it up. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to share your responses out loud. What is a bias? Yes. Good. It's any feeling or attitude we have towards a certain individual or group of people. So an example would be somebody might have a bias against same-sex couples. So if you're working with a family or a child who has same-sex parents, that bias can get in the way of being inclusive to them. So what are 3 sources of bias? Good, I heard media, I heard family, and religion. Good. So all of those things implant these ideas and thoughts into our head that we instill as our own. So religion, again, might say homosexuality is wrong. The media tells us homosexuality is abnormal. So we start to believe that. What are 3 areas of bias? Ability, good. Sexuality, yes. And race, good. So again, we might have a bias against a particular race, and that could lead us to not being able to provide inclusive education to children. Okay, so whether or not we realize it, we all have biases. We just might not know them. So as an educator, it's important to recognize our biases and work through them. So something we might do is research what homosexuality is. And that will lead us to maybe accept rather than tolerate homosexuality. We'll then be able to connect with families and children who have parents who are homosexual. And then we'll be able to empathize with them and work with them. So, do you think that that's easy? It's an easy thing to say, to do. It's actually a lot easier said than done. You'll notice I put a piece of paper in front of you also at the beginning of class, and it has a list of 10 individuals. I'm asking you to pretend with your group of 4 that you worked with that it's the end of the world. You have 3 minutes to choose 6 out of those 10 people to save to take with you to another planet and start the human race. You'll notice by looking at the list that it's very minimal. You don't get a lot of descriptions about the people. So, go ahead. Okay, I'll now ask you, we're going to tally up the scores. Out of 10 groups, how many people chose the law student? 5, okay. How many chose the law student's wife? 8. The pregnant 16-year-old? 6. The policeman with a gun? 4. The clergyman? 3. The female physician? Oh, only 2. The 46-year-old male violinist, 1. The South Asian student, 10, wow. The former prostitute, 5. And the gay architect, 1. Okay, so you've reflected on paper as to why you chose these people. And you'll know that because there's not very much description as to who these people are, what they do, your biases led into that. So maybe I didn't choose, maybe 9 out of the 10 groups didn't choose the architect because he's gay, and we have a bias towards gay individuals. I want you to now check off the barriers to inclusion. Now this class, we've only just touched the surface about what inclusion is, and I'll ask you for next week to continue your reading so that we could have further discussion. But in case you're wondering why do we talk about inclusion, this boy, Mitchell Wilson, 11 years old, committed suicide in September to put an end to torment he experienced at the hands of schoolmates. His crime? He had muscular dystrophy, which we'll talk about. It's a physical disease. So he was regarded by society as abnormal. And he was bullied and attacked while out on a walk, and he was tired of being bullied and ended his life. So we need to make a change. We need to talk about inclusion. Next week, we'll talk about laws and policies in terms of inclusion, and I'll ask you to read Chapter 2. Have a good weekend. Take care.